Lorenza is on.
Yes,
Excellent.
yeah.
So let's take the last question that has been put forward by a participant, Mr. Pal. And the question is there any way to ensure process compliance by individuals at organizations by implementing compliance by design? And he continues, if yes, please give an example. So it is to ensure process compliance by an individual at the organization by implementing compliance by design. And an example. Scott, will you take it first?
Du har mutet hans telefonskærm.
Ja.
Der har du klikket på hans højtaler.
Ja, hej.
Velkommen til.
So, can you hear me? Please respond to the question that is on implementing compliance by design with an example.
Sorry, Kirsty, it doesn't look like it will let Scott unmute himself at the moment. So we're just receiving some technical difficulties on our end.
Gareth, could you please speak? Or Lorenza?
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Can anyone hear me? Okay. Yes, I'm back.
Scott,
Right.
are you there?
I am. Yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Right. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to the question on implementing compliance by design and an example?
Yeah. Look, compliance by design could be
Or
implemented.
Lorenza?
Could be implemented either through integration with existing systems or like the introduction of new digital solutions.
Scott, can you hear me?
I can.
Kirsty, it looks like we can all hear you, but I'm not sure if you can hear Scott answering the question.
No, no, he can't hear me.
Lorenza, did you have any response to that?
Well, I think it's just a matter of giving clear instructions to individuals who are working on a smart work system. I don't think there is any other way to ensure and make controls and check if they follow the instruction anytime you can with evidence of your checking. And of course, further than instruction, there should be set a proper training to all individuals working outside the enterprise. I think it's the only way, training and instruction, training to explain the instructions and get the awareness of people, of individuals. Refresh my browser. No. I can't see any other way to get it
good.
done.
All right, thank you. Well, if I may add, compliance by design is something that you have start at the beginning of the process, at the beginning of the service, beginning of the introduction of a product, and so on. So compliance by design goes all the way to the beginning of the structure of GDPR and protection and privacy issues that are involved. And of course, you have to have the backup plan, which is compliance by default. So in case there is a design issue, it automatically goes in so that you have the second chance of making sure that you comply with the GDPR compliance by design and default requirement. It is an issue that requires quite a bit of discussions and cannot be answered in just a small way. However, We will be conducting a series of these events, short events, couple of hour events, and we could perhaps include it in one of the future online seminars on design by default and by compliance by design and by default. Let's take another question. Do we have a list of do's and don'ts from working from home, as that will be the next challenge in today's times? Who would like to address that? Scott, Scott is not back. No, Scott, you're back, okay?
I am indeed, yes.
The question is a list of do's and don'ts from working from home. We discussed that also in the last event. We can send that link from the last event where we did have focus on the IT security and cybersecurity issues relating to the working from home issues. There is again a whole list of them, but let's take a couple of them here.
Yeah, so it depends on, as an
Lorenzo,
individual.
you had a number of these items in your presentation. Could you repeat a couple of them, please?
Are you talking to me?
I don't think Kirsty can hear me.
We can hear you, Lorenzo. Go ahead.
Which question? Sorry, I got lost.
The question is working from home. You know,
it's the do's and don'ts.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. It's the subject matter of instructions to those who works from home. A series of do's and don'ts, but that's not enough. You have to explain and train people who are working outside the company, outside the enterprise. I think it's the only point. Then it's the concept of awareness of about what they are doing actually.
Okay, yeah, and companies and organizations must remember that it is not business as usual. Working from home is different than working from the office, and therefore organizations must issue separate instructions on what they have to do.
Yes.
Because the cyber criminals are more active when you are at home, and of course the security of any LAN connection or any link that you have has to be secured, or maybe secured with a default component and security. So organizations must address to their individuals in their manner so that they can update the security and ask the employees to be more vigilant, because the cyber criminals are extremely vigilant.
Taking also into account, if I may say, that the fact that normally or very often employees use their own device, which should not be so secure as of course the devices they use in the enterprise. There may be also multi-shared device, a PC shared among the members of the family and so on. So an extra due diligence has to be taken as for smart working.
Can I just say something, Kirsty?
Please do.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing to think about here is that working from home is new to a lot of people, but it's not new to everybody. And there are a lot of us that have worked for the whole of our lives as consultants and been used to working in office canteens and anywhere where we had VPNs in place, we had dedicated machines. And I think we can learn from those sort of service organizations that have been doing this for years.
I agree.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Gareth. Lorenzo, I have one question for you. In your presentation, you had a operation plan for intervention in writing.
Yes.
Now, who has the responsibility of preparing such an intervention operating plan? Who shall it be distributed to? Is this plan something that is open for public? Are the oversight authorities involved in approving or getting a copy of the plan, and so on? Please enlighten us.
So this is an operation. The responsibility of the operation of drafting the operation plan is up to the employer, of course. He may also get the help of councils. As a matter of fact, we have a new type, it's appearing, a new type of professional in Italy called a COVID manager. And it's not a profession taken into account by legislation at the moment, except but a project carried out by Regione Veneto, one of our regions, which is trying to ask some entrepreneurs to adopt this specific professional role, to give this specific professional role to an outside or inside a professional. And this would be the person in charge of coordinating all of the operations which are required to meet to meet the requirements of the reopening law in Italy. If it has got to be shared with the public. It's up to the entrepreneur, to the employer. We had some large enterprises who decided to disclose their plan. There might be also agreements with trade unions, but it's not the disclosure to public is not compulsory. Disclosure has to be made to the inspection bodies when they come to the firm or to the enterprise, and I guess also with the health authorities if needed. That's why, even though our legislation doesn't ask the employer to draft this operational plan, it's understandable that it has done in drafting. Otherwise, you will end up to have all the inspection bodies in your enterprise for quite a while. And there is also another aspect to be taken into account, because the inspection bodies, when they come get to a workplace, they have the power to suspend all the activities right away for up to 5 days if they can't understand what's going on, simply said. Then there is another type of sanction, the suspension, until compliance hasn't been reached. There are two separate way of sanctioning the firms. And then there might be also privacy issues, as I said before.
Yeah, thank you very much. You will receive a copy of the slides, especially from Lorenza, addressing this issue. And this is something that is at least new for me. I have not heard about this intervention operating plan earlier. Her presentation describes it in detail, and also the suggestions that she put forth right now. So perhaps that could also be one of the good things that you can do in order to get another backup plan.
Yes,
I see that Anne-Marie, excuse me.
It's not, hold on, Kirsty. It's not a problem to send my slide, but I think it would be nice for everyone to receive also a more specific document, because my slides are really, they summarize a lot, but I understand this is not a really easy matter to get into.
No, but we will also include your recording, your speech, and if you have a separate document, please send it to us, and we will include it as part of the follow-up procedures that we have after the conference. I can see that Anne-Marie and Susanna and Lena also are there online. So you are also welcome to respond to any of the questions that we have for the next half an hour, where we have a panel, where we continue with the panel discussion. Scott, are you on, and can you tell us a little bit more about the questions that we covered so far, Scott? No.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes, we can indeed. Sure, go ahead.
Excellent. Okay. Look, one of the questions was the working from home aspect. Look, one of the issues you got is if you're doing it as an individual, then it's obvious aspects. If it's trying to message out to the wider teams, again, it's things like preventing access to like USB sticks, not using personal devices to access emails, and preventing that from occurring. So if organizations are using single sign-on, prevent single sign-on from occurring and force people to use their username and password, or do it once and have it sort of change, and then also have either weekly or fortnightly passwords changes is something that I've seen a lot of organizations start to implement, which is frustrating for the user, but good from a safety perspective. Also, it's worth looking at whitelisting IPs. So what is and isn't whitelisted. So providing instructions for employees on how to find out what their IP is. If they have a static, if they have a dynamic, then it can be a little bit trickier. But again, reducing the amount of potential access that organizations have. It's as simple as that.
All right, thank you very much. Let's continue with some of the other questions that we have had. And we could take one on scoping of the GDPR activities. Recently, I was with a client that thought that they were compliant with their GDPR activities. However, they had forgotten to scope, and this particular question was on scoping of their data protection agreements. So that due to the lack of scoping, they had to make about 300-400 data protection agreement, and on the other hand, they had decided to make one standard agreement, a very long, very detailed agreement for all of them, which created multiple problems and issues with the vendors and third parties and all of the associates. So Lorenza, Scott, and also Lena and Anna-Marie and Susanna, if you're on, you can also join in and respond to the questions. Do you have any guidance, recommendations on the scoping component of GDPR?
Scoping and conduct.
Scott or Lorenza?
In the scoping as for COVID legislation?
No, scoping as far as the GDPR is concerned, so that you don't, so you don't, you eat an elephant one piece at a time, and not the whole beast.
Did you mention third parties as well? Sorry, the question wasn't clear.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah.
So look, if it's about third parties, then one size doesn't fit all. And again, what we've seen is individual agreements tailored for the types of services that the third parties and fourth parties are providing. I think one of the everyone's in assessment fatigue at the moment, with like especially if IT alone were asking for ISO certifications or standards and frameworks, and from a GDPR standpoint, really ask the questions that matter, but tailor them to the type of services the organization is providing. It doesn't mean to say that you've got to have 500 different types of assessments. You can pick it by the types of data that they're either processing or exchanging or storing and securing. It doesn't make a difference. Put them into buckets effectively and then ask those relevant questions. The amount of assessments that I see where questions aren't relevant, they're just tick box exercises. And the problem is if you push out 100 questions, the first 20 questions, and it's worth looking at this actually as an exercise, will be beautifully answered. 20 questions, sort of 25, 30 onwards, will get a little bit weaker, and by the 100th question, you'll just get the worst answer ever. So assessment fatigue kicks in quickly. So look, when you're looking at third parties, tailor and simplify. Don't go overboard from that perspective. That's something that we're seeing a lot of customers do.
Thank you. Susanna and Lena and Anne-Marie, I can see you are on, so please press speak so that you also can participate in this panel discussion. There is one question that came up.
Yeah.
This is Susanna. I don't know if you can hear me.
Let me take one more question from here. It's from Peter, and he asked, what does accountability mean in practice? Does the GDPR also apply if I use pseudo-anonymous and encoded data? And we'll take the other questions later. So the question is on accountability mean in practice. That's the one. And then the second one is on the anonymization or pseudo-anonymization or encoded data. How do you react to that? Who would like to take it?
I can take accountability.
Okay.
Well, accountability as for the GDPR, but also in what I was talking about, is everything. You must be able to prove, to give evidence of what you are doing, but that's not a mere exercise, or it's not because of the European legislators wants you to suffer, but it's you have to focus on the individual's protection, either with the hygienic measures as our COVID legislation, or data protection. That's all. You have to be able to prove, to give evidence to each data subject what you are doing to protect his data. And I think that's why I said that accountability is everything. Otherwise, in my opinion, GDPR is a nonsense if you don't follow this path.
Scott, how about you? Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I mean, from the privacy standpoint, obviously the accountability is pretty straightforward. When we're looking at there's also data accountability as well. So if we look at the more technical aspect, there's a, you know, for an individual or organizations are accountable for what they class as open data, and they have to make sure that they are making that data available, but also safe and secure, as per the principles that the privacy team are expecting them, or if they're the privacy team, that what they have to do from that standpoint. So it's justify for them. It's being able to properly justify why they're storing it in a way that they are, why they're using the third or fourth party that they are, what mechanisms they put in place to make that safe and secure. Yeah, accountability, it's so broad that I think, as Lorenzo mentioned, it's kind of pointless if people aren't. It's just your responsibility. It's as simple as that. Yeah.
But it's quite
perhaps
a
the
simple.
legislators.
So it's
Lorenzo.
quite I was saying that it's quite a simple mechanism when you get into it. You have just to think, to be aware of what you are doing. If you want to do something, first start thinking why, what's my scope, and then try to give evidence and keep evidence of what you are doing or what you're reasoning behind your decisions, and this will become something very very normal for you. So it will be a way of acting, way of reasoning. At the beginning, accountability may seem quite awkward, but after a while, it should be very automatic.
Yeah, and probably also the accountability for the board of directors and senior management, not only just the compliance officer.
Yeah.
Let us get to the third question from Peter, and that was, what about Brexit? Data protection officer in England wouldn't be an EU representative. Well, that's two different things. Gareth, if you're still around, could you please address that? And Lady Olga, and of course, the rest of the speakers.
Yeah, I think there are still a few loose ends, I'm afraid, with Brexit, as we discussed before. So someone's got this. Someone's echoing me. So there are some issues that need to be resolved. We don't know the answer to them yet. I mean, we're hoping, as I said in my talk, that we're going to get adequacy and we're going to perform in the right sort of way. But
Gareth, are you on?
Finishing off, we're touching on things like the Article 8 of the EU Charter, where people are guaranteed data protection, but the UK won't be part of that arrangement, and is the UK law covering that adequately afterwards? And then we've got all the issues around the Investigatory Powers Act as well. So it's going to be a challenge for someone in the UK. My recommendation would be that companies, until we know better, assume that there will be a no deal and do the sort of planning that you would do putting the other things in place that you would need to have in place. Does that stop the feedback? So plan for a no deal and hope for something. Hope for adequacy. That would be my view. I don't know if Lady Olga's still there and has something to say.
Okay, Gareth, I cannot hear you, but I understand that you are online. Did you have any more comments?
Can you hear me now?
Scott?
Gary, Kirsty, can you hear
Okay,
me?
Olga, would you like to address the issue on the Brexit and the DPO?
Olga needs to be on.
Olga, please press speak.
Right, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I can hear you.
Well, I'm going to take a slightly broader view. I think actually we're looking at too much detail about the negotiations for the Brexit exit. Truth is that a lot of the issues between the UK and Brussels are not really that contentious once you actually want to get over the line. It's a lot of other, because we're going to marry and match a lot of the European standards on regulation. It's really more how we're trying to do our own, maintain our own independence. And I think Brussels has great difficulty in accepting that. After all, Brussels accepts America as being independent, it accepts Africa countries as being independent, but they don't accept the UK, at least not in their mind. This is the real issue. When you come to the date of December the 31st, we will probably have a pretty scratch piece of paper. And I think, as Gareth quite rightly said, it could be just simply a working paper to move on, but there will have to be a recognition of some sort. There will be some sort of conclusion. But it's more principle, I think. The detail actually can be scrambled pretty quickly once two sides understand where they really are. So GDPR has already been mentioned by Gareth. That's already incorporated in our own withdrawal agreement. We're not that divergent. It's more a question of accepting that Britain is independent as Chile, as America. That's where they have their problem. And perhaps that's the problem we have in our separation.
Okay, thank you very much. Scott, did you have anything to add?
I just think that regardless of what happens with Brexit, that everyone just carries on. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, cool.
Okay, Anne-Marie or
Seems
Lena,
Just seems Kirsty can't hear me, which is
did you have anything to add?
Lena and Marie, I log in.
Can you hear my?
Good, good for him.
Can you hear me?
Okay, let's continue.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
I
yes,
can hear
Lena,
you.
we can hear you.
Okay.
Scott, are you on?
Yes. I think, Kirsty, maybe it's you who has a problem hearing when people adding on and activating the speakers. Can you hear me now, Kirsty?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm part of a UK-based company called Specsavers, and we have our DPO situated in UK. And the steps we have been taking, preparing for Brexit, is actually designating a data privacy manager in Europe, preparing for the time when UK leaves and becomes not a member of EU. So we have taken the step also designating a data protection officer in yeah, actually it's me situated in Denmark, but it could have been any EU country.
Have we now lost the sound?
I think we've lost Kirsty.
We lost Kirsty.
Never work with animals, children, or technology.
Definitely. But actually, Lorenza, I'd like to ask you a question since we're on air at the moment.
Yes.
From your perspective, sitting in Bologna, how do you see the impact of UK leaving the European Union? In other words, turning the debate around.
Personally, I like it.
Right, okay.
I'm supporting you.
Right, okay.
That's it. Then if there isn't an agreement, there will be a bit of a problems. I agree, but where are you? I would prefer to face all the problems and the complication and be truly independent than coming to an agreement, a compromise. That's my personal opinion.
I really love that.
I like to
Karen,
say things what I think,
really
just in
interesting.
case I would come to the UK and live there if they send me out of the European Union.
Well, you'll be very welcome. Is your
Thank you.
view, is your point of view reflected by a lot of your friends and colleagues?
Yes, yes, I may say so. Yes, definitely, definitely. We are really admiring you for the courage.
Well, I think European Union as a whole is changing and evolving, and I think 5 years from now, operationally, it'll be very, very different.
It will be completely different starting, and I must say that probably COVID has started a new era of the European Union. Definitely.
Yes, I mean, I think in a way the loss of the harmonization, we do need some harmony, but you can do it without being heavy-handed about it. We've certainly learned lessons about the way Italy has managed COVID, and I regret that we've been rather slow in picking up the signals. But I mean, Gareth, what's your opinion? You can't
Yeah,
hear
I mean,
me.
I think I'm getting the same vibes that.
I think Gareth has left us now.
No, he hasn't. He's online.
He's online. Okay. Gareth,
Can you hear me?
please
Can you hear me?
enlighten us.
Yeah.
You can't hear me.
Gareth,
Scott,
we can
how
hear
about you?
No, Gareth, we can hear you. Please continue.
Okay, so I'm getting confused by who can hear me and who can't. No, I think, I mean, just as an observer of what's going on in different parts of Europe in relation to the the corona crisis. We are seeing different governments act differently, and people are raising the sort of questions we can see coming from Italy, who were hit hard and first by this. So I expect, as Lady Olga said, that it will challenge some of the thinking. And some of the people sitting in Brussels have been sort of left out of the loop in all this and are feeling a little bit left out.
I think I rather agree with that. Kirsty, what about your view?
Well, I'm sorry, I was not on. Could you please repeat the question?
Well, it's really about the evolving shape of the European Union, which we were talking now with Lorenzo and Gareth, and I'm just really wondering, 5 years from now, what do you reckon?
Well, 5 years from now, my God, we don't know what's going to happen in June when about these negotiations. I think
another region in Italy in June.
Well, that is also
halfway through
a problem. However, you know, I would like to think that because of the close relationship that we have within the UK and the EU, they have to get some kind of a compromise. And I happen to know Michel Barnier from many years ago when he was the compliance commissioner and was also involved in the European Central Bank and all these areas. And he is quite he's a person who is very well prepared, who is very strict, and you know, he's kind of a no-nonsense type of a guy. And in this situation, with these different things in the politics involved and the various conflicting interest within the political sphere of the UK, I think there has to be a different approach than just the formalities, because Barnier, being kind of a person who is following the Maastricht Treaty and all the other treaties and the Rome Treaty, there has to be some kind of a flexibility to ensure that you reach an agreement that can work for both sides and not just one side dictating the other. And hopefully that can be solved somehow. There was another question, and that was with regards to COVID-19 outbreak. If I may take that, will there be any leniency treatment from the authorities or leniency treatment from any oversight authorities as far as the COVID-19 calamities are concerned? Would anybody like to address that? Scott, can you hear us?
Fine. Refresh the browser.
Well, if you get stuck, please refresh your browsers.
Bye.
Okay, good.
Gonna refresh.
Yeah, good job.
leniency treatment as for the GDPR sanctions.
Yes, who would like to address that? Would there be any leniency provisions from any oversight or any other authority on the COVID-19 calamities or problems?
Kirsty, can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Excellent, cool. So look, we talked about this in the last session, actually. I went over a couple of specific pieces of legislation. I don't have it to hand today, but it's going to be subjective. I mean, if the critical failure was negligence and malpractice, then there's not going to be leniency regardless of the current situation. You know, not protecting data in the way that it's expected to be protected is not going to be ignored or forgotten from that standpoint. But I think if it comes to, if it's the processing of medical data, for example, that needs to occur, then there might be some leniency, especially if we look at private healthcare, for example. Then there will be some leniency to a certain degree, and there's been measures put into place. But it really depends. I mean, it's subjective based on what the problem is as per anything. I mean, adequate is similar to the UK Bribery Act when it came out. There's an expectation of adequate procedures put into place, and this is no different. If that level of adequacy isn't met, then leniency won't be given regardless of the situation. Certainly that's what we've seen from the CNIL, the AEPD in Spain and the CNPD in Portugal. They've not been, they've continued as per. So yeah.
What happened in Italy as for leniency? Our supervising authority said that, of course, they wouldn't be so harsh on infraction caused by an emergency measures. It means that, of course, this lockdown took all of us by surprise, and we had to hurry to be able to go on with our activities, and that's okay. As for that, there would be surely some leniency, but he also added that these problems, any problems faced with non-compliance, facing non-compliance issues, has to be solved afterwards. That, I think, is the turning point of all the situation when inspection will take on again.
All right, thank you very much. We are approaching the end of the Q&A session. Is there anybody else of the speakers that would like to add something? Okay. Well, let's take one last question, and this is also on the UK. The question is, when UK have presence in most EU countries, is it not a costly affair to have an independent UK DPA, as you need to follow both GDPR and the DPA? And it's not easy to stay independent. Okay, that's, well, the UK ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, is a very, very influential and a very active oversight authority, and they are doing their job, in my opinion, extremely well. They are issuing guidance that we all can use in the rest of Europe as well. So it would, I don't think it's a matter of cost when it comes to the independent DPA, UK DPA, or did you mean DPO, the person who made the question? So in any case, I think ICO is doing an excellent job in their guidance to everybody else. Would you like to add something, Lorenza and Scott?
Well, if it's, I don't think it's really costly. It's always a matter of Article 25, privacy by design. If you get started in time, I don't see any bigger cost.
No, I don't think it's a cost issue either. I agree with you. So, Scott, are you there?
Way of managing your privacy issues.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. Look, the ICO have been doing this for quite some time already anyway, and have maintained a very independent stance. I mean, prior to GDPR, again, organisations, we had lots of UK businesses operating independently or via sister companies, joint ventures, or in mainland Europe, and they've done a great job. So the reality is that from a cost standpoint, I think the only cost standpoint the ICO have to worry about is losing their skill set because the private sector's paying more. I think there's more a manpower impact from their perspective because they're losing good staff because everyone's looking for privacy specialists at the moment. But apart from that, I don't think there's a more costly affair.
No. We all agree. The cost aspect should not come into consideration, at least not at this time. Well, let's take one last question, and that is also a very important one, and that is for the medical data, the donor and the patient data. Will GDPR overrule acts and laws like the HIPAA, the US HIPAA?
The simple answer is no. So again, I mean, obviously HIPAA's specific to North America, and you look at the individuals affected. They work relatively no, I say relatively cohesively. They're not. Unfortunately, HIPAA is slightly more complex and a little bit more difficult. But no, the reality is you look at the subjects affected and the locations that they're in, and obviously GDPR applies to Europe, and HIPAA applies to North America. Well, it also does apply to outside of North America as well, depending on who's being processed. But still, HIPAA is actually pretty straightforward because it has a set of clear controls by comparison, so it's a little bit more prescriptive. But yeah, Lena, if you want to take this, then.
Yes, I have.
Lena, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
No.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good. We are treating health data in the company where I work. And,
Yeah, please go ahead, Lena.
Can you hear me, Cassie? Can
Kirsty,
everybody?
Yeah, we can, Lena. Kirsty, Lena's speaking.
Okay, I'm working in a company where we process health data, and we have had issues where customers has complained regarding a ruling we have issued where we will not be able to delete patient data within the retention period stated in each country's patient data laws. And actually, we have seen that the data authorities in various countries, such as Denmark and such as Holland, has accepted that we have some retention.
Lena, are you speaking?
Yes, I am, Cassie. We have seen that the data authorities, they actually accept that the patient data laws in some aspects overrules GDPR.
She is speaking.
So what I would say is, in my opinion, patient data laws issued by each country will actually overrule GDPR in some aspects.
Kan vi bytte de der?
Du skal åbne en anden browser.
Nej, nej.
Det er ikke sat op.
Jo. To år det nu lukket.
The sound quality on my side is quite good, but however, I have a feeling that when I speak, when I put on my speaker, Kirsty is not able to listen in, whereas the other participants are able to listen. Does anybody has the audience been able to listen to my comments?